Welcome. Nice to have you here. Today is our Relax into Health, Wealth, and Happiness meeting. And as you may know, that means we'll be relaxing. But, and of course, for those who are here live, you have been here before, so you know what that means. Maybe somehow, in some ways, you understand what that means. For those who might come across this on YouTube, as sometimes people seem to do, it probably deserves a little bit of explanation. So, and it's always helpful review. So, first of all, what is the intention? Why would you be here? You want to make sure you're in the right place. So the intention here is self-realization, because that's the purpose of your life. That's what you're here for. That's what you want, whether you know that consciously or not. Maybe you don't even really understand what the words are pointing to, but that's what you want. And I'll explain it a little bit more momentarily, but that's the intention. And so what these words are pointing to, self-realization, is to recognize and acknowledge in direct experience that who you are in truth, and to know that as what is real. And as it turns out, we've been trained or hypnotized into a kind of inversion where we believe that we believe that the dream is the primary reality, without recognizing that the dream is dependent. When I say dream, I mean waking state, dream state, all of the experiences that we have. But particularly the waking state. I'm using the term dream to refer to all of that content, though, whether it's dream or waking state. But most of us identify very strongly with the waking state. And we believe that that's the primary reality because we've been taught to do that. But we overlook the obvious fact that this dream or waking state is actually completely dependent upon something. And so that something that this dream is dependent upon is independent, whereas the dream is dependent. So if that something is not there, if that independent something is not there, then the dependent dream or waking state cannot exist, because that's the nature of it, is that it is dependent upon what is independent. Now, you might already know the answer to that, and if you do, then I don't know, you could pat yourself on the back or something, I guess. But maybe you don't know the answer to what that independent something is. Well, that independent something is you, and we can use different names to point to it. Doesn't matter what the name is, particularly, unless it does. I mean, if it matters to you, then that's fine. But the names that we could use, we could say soul, we could say God, we could say self with a capital S, we could say all kinds of different things, consciousness, awareness. And so that's fine. We have to use some words to point to it or describe it. But that's what it is that is independent, because everything else depends upon that. You can't have any experience if you're not aware of the experience. If there's no awareness, there's no experience, there's no nothing. Everything else depends first upon that. And if you observe your experience, well, I'm getting way ahead of myself here. If you, but hey, it's just happening. If you observe your experience, then what you will find is that everything is constantly appearing and disappearing in this self or consciousness awareness, in the independent reality, the primary reality, the true reality. It's all, the language is funny here because of course the dream, the content, it's also real. It's not unreal, but it's because here we can observe it, we can experience it. But again, it's dependent and it comes and goes. And so if we're invested in that as our true primary reality, and we think, I am all of this stuff, I am these feelings, I am these thoughts, I am this body, I am this personality, I am these relationships, I am my power, my status, my financial, bottom line or whatever, then we're setting ourselves up for tremendous anxiety because all that stuff is constantly moving. You can't pin it down. It will never stay the same. It's impossible because that's its nature. It's not that there's something wrong with it or there's something wrong with you for not being able to pin it down and make it permanent in that exact way. That's just its nature, is that its nature is vibration. I mean, everything, even at a material science level, we can observe that everything is vibration. What is it that we experience? Boy, I'm just laying it all out today. Here we go. What if we notice what our experience is? This is a lot of information being given. So don't let yourself be overwhelmed. Let's take a step back. It's relax into health, wealth, and happiness. So the first thing, foremost, is just relax. Don't worry about understanding intellectually. And intellectual understanding can be helpful, maybe, but it's certainly not necessary. It can be useful as a kind of confirmation, maybe, but it's really not necessary. So all of the information, all the knowledge that comes through this meeting is really not to provide an intellectual understanding, although it might offer that, but it's mostly to point to a direct experience so that you can recognize what's being pointed to, because what's being pointed to is you. And the way that you can benefit most is to relax. It's an active relaxation. It's not to go to sleep. It's not to pass out. It's to be very attentive to your experience and notice how it is that you get tense, how it is that you reject, how it is that you strain, how it is that you're making so much effort all the time, how it is that you're doing so much self-harm. Because you're constantly, if you pay attention, you'll notice there's this constant reactivity to all this stuff, trying to manage it all. But all of that effort, all of that activity is actually self-harm. So it won't be completely apparent to you at first. You shouldn't expect that it will, but if you just accept that and you're willing to investigate with that as the parameter, it will start to dawn on you. You will start to see it. And so this active relaxation through awareness, through self-observation, self-study, allows you to see the self-harm of grasping at all of that stuff and trying to manage it all. And that will help you to stop. And that's the relaxation. So it's active relaxation. You have to be present, aware, observant, studying yourself. And then through that, you will start to notice that all of this activity that you're habitually, compulsively engaged with is actually self-harm. It hurts. It gets you nowhere good, and it just hurts. So you start to see it for what it is, and then through that, you start to release, relax, stop doing it. And it's a process, because then it will build up again, and you'll feel compelled yet again to start engaging in the same kind of self-harm. But you just stay with the process: active relaxation, active relaxation, active relaxation. Okay, so with that as the backdrop, let's pick it up again. So that we can see that all of our experience consists of, fundamentally, it's our senses and thought. Probably you've heard me say this before. If you've heard me say anything, if you haven't heard me say anything, then this will be new to you. But if you've heard me say anything, you've probably heard me say this. But just see it again in a fresh way. Look to your own experience now and start to be curious about this. Notice that everything that's happening is that you are experiencing consists of your senses and thought. So we're really very caught up in this hypnosis that really is just consists of the senses and thought. And we start to latch on to this there's this sort of it's a bit of like a shadow or something. It's difficult to say exactly what it is, but there's this sort of mirage. It's not even a mirage, because it's not even there enough to say that it's a mirage. Maybe it's sort of a mirage. It's sort of there's certain aspects of all of this that we start to identify with, even but behind that, what we're really identifying with is something that can't be found at all. It's not there. It's this idea that I am this thing that's doing it all and that has to figure it all out. And so, as I was saying, that just generates an enormous amount of anxiety, because then we feel like I am this thing and I've got to manage it all to protect this thing and protect my interests so that I'll be okay forever and ever. And we might intellectually be able to say, well, I know I won't be okay forever and ever, because nothing is forever. But then there's a dishonesty there, because if we really were to recognize and acknowledge fully, thoroughly, that the truth of that nothing in this world of up and down, in this world of vibration, is forever, then we would be more engaged in active relaxation, because we would start to really see how much self-harm we are causing with this delusion. So everything consists of these five senses and the thoughts, all of our experience, and all of that's vibration, right? We can see that that's true. That all of it can be understood and measured as vibration, frequency. So what do we see? We see light. Well, what is light? Light is vibration. We hear sound. Sound is what? Is vibration. The thoughts are vibration. They can be measured, right? We can hook somebody up to a device and we can measure their brain waves. And it's vibration. All of it's vibration. Taste and smell, it's all vibration. So all of this is vibration. What is vibration? You have had experience of vibration, right? So vibration is this back and forth, up and down, constant movement, nothing's staying the same. So all of this experience consists of vibration. All of this experience thereby is constant movement, activity. And if you are trying to pin it down and make something here permanent, it's not going to happen. So you need to start, I say you need to, for your own sanity, for your own well-being, it will be very helpful. It's essential to start to acknowledge that and recognize, what am I doing here? I'm trying to do something impossible. I'm trying to pin down and make permanent something that by its very nature is constantly in motion, never the same. So that's the definition of self-harm that I've just described, right? I'm trying to do the impossible. And I'm believing that achieving that is essential for my okayness. Coming back to that fundamental lie that I was pointing to earlier, the lie that, or this delusion that we believe that I am something here, that it's this sort of shadowy mirage thing that can't actually be found, but we have this sense that I am this thing that depends upon making all of this stuff static. So we've got it inverted, actually. Again, this is a lot of information, so it will make sense to you on however it does. And don't worry about it, because it's just pointing to something. Actually, as there's a direct experience, a direct realization of what's being pointed to, then the knowledge comes alive in you and it manifests in you. So you don't need to get it from outside, and then, it's not like you take it from outside and then synthesize it within yourself. No, it already exists within you. I'm just giving voice to it. And it's all I'm doing is pointing to that which already exists in you as you. And when you glimpse it, then you will start to recognize it, and it will enliven in you, and you can start to see the truth of it. So again, don't try too hard to make sense of it all. Rather, just do the act of relaxation and just start to see what is. It will shine a light somewhere in you. And everybody's a little different. So that's why there has to be lots of words said, because everybody needs a different pointers, different things that will shine the light in the right way, that will have this cause this self-recognition. But again, so we're trying to do this impossible thing because we've got it inverted. So we're trying to pin down what is inherently dynamic and make it static. And we're overlooking that there is a fundamental independent reality that we already are, that by its nature is static. So you don't have to make what is dynamic static in order for you to be okay. You only need to recognize the truth that who you already are already is that you're trying to make out there. You don't need to make it out there. It's already true. And the way that you recognize that is through the dynamic. Because again, the dynamism, the movement, the activity is that light, right? You can't have light without vibration, or at least you can't manifest that light without vibration, because again, light is vibration, right? It's all frequency. So if you can measure the frequency of a particular wavelength of light, right? If you have a red light, it has a particular frequency. that can be measured in hertz or whatever it's measured in. So the light is a vibration. That light, or that manifestation of light, is a reflection that allows you to see yourself as your independent nature. So there's no problem actually with all of this activity. All of the activity is divinely perfect in order to shine the light so that you can recognize your true nature. But when we get it inverted, then we start thinking, oh, this is a big problem, right? All of this is a big problem. Oh no, I'm having this bad experience. I shouldn't be having this bad experience. I should only be having the good experience, according to me, what I think good is. So then we set up this whole scenario in which we're constantly enacting self-harm because we say, well, this shouldn't be. And I've got to fix it all. I've got to manage it all. I've got to protect myself. So just notice how much strain is involved in that. All of the fear, anxiety, worry, distress, constantly trying to figure it out and manage it. So that's the self-harm that I'm talking about. And that strain, the distress, I'm just going to use the word strain for now, but it's pointing to all of that bundle of phenomena. That strain, that effort to figure it out, get it right, etc., protect, is fundamentally based on this inversion, right? Where you think, I need to pin this down. I need to make this what I want it to be so that I can be okay. But you can't achieve that. Its nature is vibration. It's constantly moving. You will never, ever, ever achieve that. You feel one way now, you'll feel another way in 10 minutes. It might be somewhat similar, but it will be different. And then tomorrow it will be something different, and the next day it will be something different. So if you say, like, only these experiences are okay, then you're guaranteeing that you're not going to be okay a good percentage of the time. So and again, because the nature of this experience is it's vibrational, constantly changing. It will never not be changing. But it's not problematic. It's perfect because, again, it is shining the light so that you can recognize what's unchanging. You can't recognize that unless that light is reflected. Otherwise, there's no that ability to recognize yourself in that way isn't possible unless there is this reflection. So but here's the big hang up, I think, for most people. Again, I'm sort of repeating myself, but saying it in a slightly different way. I think the big hang up is that we are convinced that there's some problem with what's happening with this vibrational experience. Maybe not always, but sort of always, because again, on some level, we know that we can't pin it down. That's why when things seem to be going well, you're not ever fully arrived. Have you noticed that? So there's always this sort of craving. You're always chasing after arriving at that perfection. You might say, boy, I'm feeling so good, so happy, so joyful, so blissful, so peaceful, so calm, so, whatever your thing is, boy, it's so great, but you're not quite there. You've never quite arrived. You're always close, but not quite. That's that craving that I need more. I'm not quite there. Because on some level, you recognize I can't get it because I can't actually grasp it. I can't actually pin it down. It's constantly moving and it's going to go. You know, tomorrow you'll wake up and it's going to be different. Hallelujah. Sometimes, right? I mean, sometimes it's like, oh, so awful. Just go to sleep. It will be better in the morning. And usually it is. But sometimes it's like, oh, it's so great. I don't want to go to sleep because I know when I wake up, it's not going to be like this. But this again is just pointing to the nature of this experience is vibrational. It's constantly moving. So if we make this mistake and we try to grasp it, then we're constantly either craving, or the inversion of that is avoidance, aversion, right? We're craving or avoiding. But it's the same thing. It's just in the inversion of the same energy, craving and aversion. So when it seems to be, you seem to be getting closer and closer and closer to what you want, then there's the craving, almost there, almost there. And then when it seems to be getting worse and worse and worse, there's aversion, 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 aversion. And so we're just looping all the time on this because we're chasing after trying to pin down what cannot be pinned down. But it's just an ignorance. So we can again come back to this active relaxation. So self-awareness, just to notice, to see that there is this activity happening, there is movement happening. It's energy, vibration, that's its nature. We make something of it through our thinking. We say, this is good, this is bad, this is desirable, it's undesirable, I'm succeeding, I'm failing. That's the overlay that we impose on it. But actually, its nature is just dynamism. It's just moving, vibrating. That's all it's doing. And so, as long as we're chasing after it because we say it's good, it's bad, it's good, it's bad, it's good, it's bad, then there we are playing the same self-harm game, trying to do the impossible, trying to pin it down so that finally I can be okay. But the I who I think needs to be okay by achieving the impossible is false. It's delusional. We haven't sufficiently inquired to see that, though. So that's what this active relaxation is to inquire, to start to see what's happening. You notice, okay, there is activity, there is movement, there's energy, there's vibration. So just notice that right now. Hopefully you can notice that. If you can't, then you can let me know and I can do my best to help you, but you might be dead in that case. No, but they're constantly, just notice there's breathing, there's the heart beating, thoughts are happening, sensations are occurring, right? And it's just constantly happening. And the thoughts themselves are also the vibration happening, but then there's this overlay of the thoughts on the rest of it that judge it and say that all of this means something in particular. But let's just take a step back, detach from the thoughts, just don't try to control them. Don't try to have only the right thoughts. Don't try to stop thinking. Don't try to do anything. Just kind of step back. Just let it all flow and just notice, okay, there it is. It's all just happening. Thoughts are happening. Sensations are happening. Feelings are happening. Yada, yada, yada. It's all happening. So it's just vibration. It's energy, dynamism, just occurring. So hopefully you can notice that. And then you can notice that dynamism, that energy, that movement it's by its nature constantly moving. Now, if you try to pin it down, go ahead and try that for a moment. Try and grasp it, try to do something with it, try to get hold of it, try to make permanent something there. And just notice that it's kind of unpleasant. That's the self-harm that I'm talking about. See, you're trying to do the impossible. You're trying to grasp what cannot be grasped because it's not there. The dynamism is there. The energy, the vibration is there. I'm not saying that's not there. It is. But it's there as dynamism. That's its nature. It's not a thing that can be grasped. But we try to grasp it as a thing. We try to make it permanent. We try to pin it down and say, I've got it. Now I can control it. But it won't happen. So it's very unpleasant to try to do that. Now, most of the time, people don't recognize that that's very unpleasant, and so they keep on doing it. But that's the definition of suffering, you see. So if a person chooses to continue to be ignorant about that, then there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, that's just how it is. If as long as a person chooses ignorance of the fundamental facts, there's no hope there. But if you presently can just acknowledge and see in your own actual experience, which is what I'm inviting you to do, just take a step back, notice that the nature of all of this energy is that it's just moving, and you don't need to believe anything in particular about it. You don't need to believe the judgments that it's good or bad or anything, just for as an experiment right now. I'm not saying you necessarily have to do this always, although it would be helpful, but I'm not saying you should do that always. But just for now, as an experiment right now, just take a step back, let go of all the judgments and opinions about it, let it all just flow, but don't do anything with it, and just tell the truth about it. Just notice, oh, it's just energy, is just flowing. There it is. Whether I have judgments that I like it or don't like it, it's safe, it's unsafe, or whatever, who cares? Just for now, just for a moment, just let it be and just notice. Its nature is to move, to flow, to vibrate. Okay. Now, try to do something with it. Try to grasp it. Try to control it. Try to manage it. Try to figure it out. And just notice that it's quite unpleasant. And if you notice that it's quite unpleasant, then you could just stop. Because this is the thing, it's just a self-knowledge, the self-realization is to know, oh yeah, when I do that, it hurts. That's self-harm. I'm not going to do that. And notice that even though you don't, in this direct realization, in this direct experience, you don't have to have some new thought of yourself. You don't have to have a new understanding of yourself. You don't have to label yourself as anything, but it automatically happens that your sense of yourself it shifts. Instead of being hypnotized into believing that you are this mirage being that needs to get things, organize things in a particular way for its okayness, automatically it happens that there's a realization, whether you think it or not, it doesn't matter, but it just happens automatically. There's this realization that you are this independent self, this independent reality that doesn't have any dependence on any of the stuff. Meaning, what I mean by that is you don't depend upon any particular phenomenon for your existence or okayness. Now, if you try to think about that and figure it out, then you it might not make so much sense, because then you're going to start referring back to your old idea of yourself, and you're going to try to scratch your head and figure out how does this all add up and make sense. And it's very difficult then. So I'm not saying that you don't need to do that. It's a fairly futile exercise. What I'm saying again, I will repeat myself, but just to be clear about it, I'm just saying again, just take a step back just for a moment, just as an exercise. So just notice that all of the dynamic nature is dynamic by nature. So there's energy, there's vibration, it's happening, and you don't need to understand it. You don't need to figure it out. You don't need to pin it down. You don't need to judge it. You might try to do those things. I'm not saying you have to stop doing those things or reject those impulses. I'm just saying, can you step back from it so much, so completely, so hands off, so thoroughly, at least just for a moment, that you can there's a complete allowance of all of it, just complete. And can you then just see, but you can, but I'll ask, can you see that its nature is just dynamic? That's it. You don't need to figure it out more than that. Just see that that's what's happening. That's what it is. You don't need to know what to call it or what to think about it or how you relate to it or how you feel about it or anything. Just acknowledge that that is its nature. That is what it is, without you having to understand it. It is. And it's directly experienced as this. It's too immediate for you to be able to interject some other thing in there. It's just immediately directly experienced as itself, as its own truth, as vibration. Then maybe you could even notice, then maybe it's just a flash or a glimpse perhaps, but can you also notice how pleasurable that is? Now, if you try to sustain that, maybe that becomes difficult, but just for an instant, can you glimpse how pleasurable that is? Not to try to do anything with it, not to try to figure it out or figure out how to relate to it or whether you need to protect yourself or not or anything. Could you just feel the pleasure of that? It's very, very pleasurable. It's so supremely pleasurable. I mean, much more than anything else, because there's no strain. There's no craving. There's no aversion. Can you see that? Just total freedom. Total freedom, just for an instant. So hopefully you're following along. Hopefully you can glimpse that. Then try to do something with it. Try to understand it. Try to figure out what you're going to do with this and how it's going to help you tomorrow. How am I going to pay my bills with this? How am I going to make my body immortal with this? Right? Just try that for a second and notice, oh, hurts, doesn't it? So then, again, just let go. Just be. Notice the pleasure of that, the freedom of that. And again, the thoughts will come, maybe not, but more likely than not, they'll come because you're in the habit of having certain types of thoughts. So the thoughts will come, and if you try to do something with those thoughts, then you'll probably have the same kind of experience you usually do when you have those kinds of thoughts and you try to do something with them. So don't have the wrong expectation that those thoughts shouldn't happen, or that if you try to do something with them, that you will have a different outcome, because why should you expect that? So and I point this out because I think a lot of the time people have this confusion that they can perhaps have this glimpse of this freedom, this peace that's available, but then they're trying to fit that into their old shell. Okay, so you got this shell, this shadow being, this mirage, and it's this collection of this particular thoughts and these particular opinions and particular reactions and particular habits. And you say, I am that, and I need to improve that. I need to fix that. I need to enlighten that. And I'm going to do that somehow by having some transcendent experience. And then that's going to instantly transform this habitual mirage self into what I think it needs to be. You see the trap of that? That's not, it's totally unrealistic and it's unnecessary. Now, of course, to function as a human, we need some kind of, we need a mirage self. So if you think, well, it's got to go away, then that's also a wrong expectation. But how is it going? It's not going to change as long as we keep clinging to it and we say, this is me and I need to fix it. When I say we need the mirage self, what I mean is if you don't have a sense of yourself at all, and this does happen to people, rarely, and less commonly in the United States, and probably less commonly in Europe than in some other places, but it does sometimes happen to people. But what happens is then they stop doing anything. I mean, there's nothing for them to do. There's no one for them. There's no one to do anything or to need anything. So there's a complete, they're not going to respond to anything because there's no one to respond to it. There's nothing. There's nothing there. So it would be very difficult to. I mean, it'd be impossible to function without some mirage self. But if we're clinging to the mirage self as the true self, and we're trying to use everything to polish it and improve it and fix it up, then it's just never going to work. It's really not going to work because we've got it all inverted. Again, we're back into the same old game, trying to make permanent this thing that it can't be done because the nature of this dynamism is that it's dynamic. But it is possible and desirable, I would say, to allow this mirage self to be transformed by the this we'll call authentic self, the independent self. So it's sort of like any metaphor is going to only go so far, so don't try to take this too far, but it's sort of like the waves against the shore, or the forces of nature against the mountain. Over long periods of time, they're that thing that seems so substantial is transformed. It's relieved of its rigidity and form, right? And so in that same sort of way, if we just if we just open and surrender and just as much as possible, just take the step back and detach from the identification and the strain and recognize the self-harm and stop doing it, then what happens is then that mirage self is dissolved in a very nice way, actually, because it's done by the intelligence of nature. And so we're relieved of so many of the things that have been so difficult, the fears, anxieties, worries, resentments, and so forth. And again, it happens by nature, not because you're trying to figure it out and fix it, but because there's this naturally it occurs that there will be the recognition of the tendencies towards self-harm. And as those compulsions and habits of self-harm are not indulged, because there's just this stepping back and just allowing, then they're stripped away. Because if you use it or lose it, as they say, right? So most of the time we're just constantly repeating the same thing, so that it gives the illusion of permanence. It's tremendously painful, but we feel compelled to do it out of ignorance and hypnosis. We just keep repeating the same things, and again, it gives the illusion of permanence. But when we, and what I mean by the same things, I mean the same worries, anxieties, resentments, fears, anger, aggression, hostility, all of the same kind of stuff. And you know all of that about yourself to some degree, right? It's all the stuff that you so dislike, but you make the mistake, or at least most people do, and I'm going to assume you do, because it's just how we seem to operate. We make the mistake of believing that all of those habits, those bad habits and the compulsions and all that, that's who we are. And so we think we need to fix all of that. But again, you're back in that totally futile game of trying to polish a turd, basically, to put it bluntly. So much better to let nature take its course and just surrender to the perfection of nature. And sometimes this is very easy. Maybe I've invited you several times. I'll invite you again right now. Just for a moment, just take a step back, just allow it all. Just notice that there's this dynamic nature that's occurring. There's movement, activity, vibration, frequency. It's just energy that's just happening. You don't have to understand it or label it or figure it out. Just notice that it is happening. And if you don't try to do anything with it, just for one moment, notice how wonderful that is, how freeing, how pleasurable that is. So if you just allow nature in this way, then nature relieves you of all of the bad habits, because when you're not repeating it, if you're not reinforcing it through repetition, then it gets eroded, because that's the nature of things, is they're constantly in change. And if you're not repeating it, then it gets removed. Not because you're removing it. In fact, you can't remove it. Every time you try, you're reinforcing it. But when you get out of the way, then nature, or your true self, does what you can't do. Because every time you're trying, you reinforce it. But when you stop and you take a step back and you allow nature, then it removes that. And perhaps now in this moment, perhaps in other moments when you've had this experience, you've experienced it as very pleasurable and lovely and wonderful. And so that's great. But then you should also be prepared. Other times it's not like that. Other times it's very harrowing, right? Sometimes the the compulsion is so strong And then I think we're all different in this regard. So I don't know exactly what how you're wired up. Uh, I know in my own experience that fear has been the thing. Maybe for other people, it's other stuff, but certainly for some people, it will be fear. And so for some people, they'll recognize that fear, when there's fear, then the compulsion is so strong to engage with it, to step back into it and try to fix it and do something with it and figure it out and protect, especially that, then it can seem very difficult and actually uncomfortable to continue to just allow nature to remove that. But what I can promise you is that if you are willing to do so, then you will be very happy with the result. But you have to persist sincerely. Uh, and how long that will take, I can't say. I mean, the truth is that nature is infinitely powerful, and the very instant that you completely relinquish all control and strain and effort, the very instant that you completely surrender, nature removes that from you, relieves you of that. But to get to that point of complete surrender, that's the tricky part, because sometimes we think we're surrendering, but we're still secretly holding on. And so this is where we have to persist. You just have to be willing to persist, and sincerely. Sincerity is key, because if you're not sincere, if you're keeping secretly in your back pocket, so just so that you can say I told you so, it didn't work, that's a lack of sincerity. And then of course it can't work because you're not going to be willing to fully let go. But if you are sincere, if you say I can see the truth of this in my own experience, and that's the point here, is I'm wanting you to be able to see the truth of it in your own experience. Because if you just take it take my word for it, that can only go so far. You can only get, you can't fully surrender just because I've told you so. You can fully surrender when you've seen the truth of it for yourself, and you have to see the truth of it for yourself with the smaller stuff, so with the easier stuff, so that then when the more challenging, harrowing stuff occurs, then you have the faith because you have the direct experience to know it for yourself, to know the truth of it. Because it takes that, you have to be willing to have the sincerity to go all the way, to surrender all the way. And that can only happen if you have seen the truth of it for yourself in your actual experience, which is why I've been repeatedly inviting you to see that in your experience. It's not just an intellectual understanding. It's not just something you've heard somebody say or read in a book or something, but you've actually looked for yourself and seen. So I'll just say, I've got 1 minute. So it's perfect timing to review. So the basic process is this. When you have, and all of you have, so you don't have to doubt it, but this is the basic condition, is that one must have on some level had the recognition that they're done with suffering, that they can't suffer any longer. So when that condition has been met, when you have on some level recognized I can't suffer anymore, it's too much, and then this is what you do. You say, okay, I'm going to stop. I'm going to take a step back right now. And I'm just going to notice that all of this stuff that I'm experiencing is just activity. It's vibration. It's energy. Not to diminish it or dismiss it in any way. Full respect, because this is the supreme being. So it's not unreal. It's divine. But just to notice that what it actually is vibration. It's not all the things that I'm believing it is. It's not all the scary or pleasurable things that I'm imagining, but it's actually just vibration, energy. Just notice the truth of that in your actual experience directly. And which all that is required is just to let go for a moment, just to let go and just be aware, just observe your actual experience and just see directly that's what is true. Is there's just all of this movement activity occurring, and that's all we can really say about it in truth. And then to see that when you try to do something with it, when you try to control it, when you try to manage it, it hurts. You get burned. So then clearly, obviously, the correct answer is stop. And furthermore, then to actually look and see, not only is it true that when you try to do something with it that it hurts, but actually when you just don't, when you let go, when you surrender, that it's so pleasurable beyond the attainments of this world, right? No matter how much you get in this world, it cannot ever give you the actual pleasure that's available when you let go. Because in the letting go, the craving is gone. You're not chasing after anything. There's a fulfillment, and it's instantaneous, and it's right now. Again, you have to see the truth of this in your own experience. Of this, I'm just describing the process, and hopefully you're following along. So once you have this experience, which hopefully you've had now at least once, maybe twice, maybe 3 times in the course of this meeting, now you want to be intelligent about this and continue to apply this insight so that no matter what happens in your life, but really particularly when you're noticing that you're hurting, because otherwise it's not a problem. But whenever you notice that you're hurting, again, just do the same thing. Just pause, take a step back, notice that independent of your thoughts about it, that there's what it really is some activity, it's some energy. And when you don't try to do anything with it, then there's freedom. Now, sometimes, as I've said, sometimes the compulsion to step in and do something with it is so strong because there's fear or whatever your thing is. And so you might not immediately recognize the pleasure, the freedom that's here. Why? Because you haven't fully surrendered. You haven't fully let go. So here you have to persist. You have to, again, acknowledge and recognize what you know for your own, in your own direct experience, because you've experienced it directly, which is that peace is available, freedom is available, and it's available now in the letting go, in the surrender now. And so then you must persist sincerely in your willingness to surrender completely, however long that takes. Maybe it takes 1 more second. Maybe it takes 5 minutes. Maybe it takes an hour. Maybe it takes 5 days. Maybe it takes a month. Maybe it takes 6 months. However long it takes. To persist sincerely in your willingness to surrender completely, because you know that that's the truth. And you know that that offers you self-realization, not as something that you can say, aha, I've got it, but in the revelation of that true freedom in direct experience, which is known right now in that surrender. So, again, a lot of information, but you don't have to understand it, just apply it. And the process is quite simple. Hopefully, you've had the glimpse repeatedly, at least once. If not, then please review the recording of this so that you can have that glimpse, because that's the most important thing. Everything else depends upon that. Otherwise, it's hopeless. You have to have the direct glimpse, and it's not difficult. Just requires your willingness, and the only prerequisite is that you've had enough of suffering, and I'm sure you have. So that is it from me today. For those who are here live, I'm happy to stay on for Q&A in case you have anything. So let me end this recording now.